time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one and all, to a special Wednesday matinee edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. My name's Keaton Weiss, here with Russell Dobular.
Hello.
We got a good show for you guys today. Happy Juneteenth to all who celebrates. Juneteenth is off to a good start as a holiday. My kids had no summer camp today because it's Juneteenth, and we didn't really have much food in the house, so I decided I would take them out to the diner for, some pancakes and stuff. And, I live in a mostly white suburb of Albany here in upstate New York. These whiteys are loving Juneteenth. They are taking advantage of the day off. The diner was packed. They're all in there celebrating. This is the thing. The holidays breakfast at diners are very crowded. Very crowded. And I don't like going places when they're crowded. It's loud. It takes a long time. It's a hassle parking. I like going to an empty place. So I think, all right, Wednesday, this is fine. And then I get here. Oh, Juneteenth, of course, it's crowded. So look, I'm all for Juneteenth. We should make this a holiday, but we need to implement a policy as a country that for every holiday we add, we have to take one away, because it's going to be too much. It's already getting to be too much. So here's this. How about we keep
Why don't we get rid of President's Day?
I was going to say, since they're so close together, why don't we just get rid of July 4th and make Juneteenth the new July 4th?
That's actually a very good idea.
That'll give Winston Marshall something to talk about. That'll be a big point of conversation at the douchebag dialogues next year.
That'll give
the
them
woke
something
Bob
to
has
talk
canceled
about.
July 4th for Juneteenth.
Yeah,
convene a panel.
The gender woo-woo is definitely running out of steam.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
think you'll be able to run a whole festival on that one issue next year.
Right.
So yeah, DEI's going the way of the dinosaur.
Oh, you know what? Here, good catch here. All right, you know what? I guess July 4th is safe for now because Spaghetti Lee says Columbus Day gotta go. I understand they renamed it. That doesn't really do it for me. No, I agree with that. I agree with all right, we could do that. So then the next holiday we add, whatever major holiday is close to that, has to go because it's too much. It's too much, with all this. It makes life too unpredictable. Is this going to be open? Are there going to be limited hours? Is the bank going to be open? It's just a big thing to think about and deal with. So happy Juneteenth to everybody. And so we'll cancel Columbus Day. That's fair. We swapped that out for Juneteenth. But then the next holiday that we add, we got to take one away because it's getting out of control with the holidays.
Yeah, I was actually, because when they first started Juneteenth, I don't think they had, and now it's a federal holiday, right?
Juneteenth is a federal holiday now, yeah.
Right, yeah. Before, nothing was closed. It was just Juneteenth. And obviously, I live in Harlem, so there's a lot of celebrating across the street from my house on Juneteenth. But that was about it. Nothing was closed. The banks were all open. But now, now the market's closed today. It's being celebrated as a real holiday. And although it's not in the thumbnail, I put together the third of my Louisiana trilogy, my long-promised expose on the so-called Civil War Museum there. So we're doing a special Juneteenth segment that is a very thorough investigation that is going to explode some of your cherished myths. Never again will you be able to watch a video of women exposing their breasts on Bourbon Street the same way after this expose. It's not going to be that kind of an expose.
It would have been in the thumbnail, but Russell informed me this was going to be a much more substantial piece, when we logged on at 1:30. I didn't know. I thought it was going to be a 10-minute piece about the Confederate Museum or the Civil War Museum. That's really the
I like to keep him on it. I like to keep him on his toes.
So I didn't know. Otherwise, it would have been in there. But we got some stuff to get to in the meantime. Got a full show today. And so why don't we start off with some breaking news from yesterday, which was the CEO of Boeing getting his time at the barrel in Washington. So go ahead, whichever order you want to do this in.
Yeah, we haven't done these in a while. All right, let's see if organizing this has helped. Yeah, it has helped.
I'm leaving on a jet plane.
There we go.
That's our special Boeing music, which we haven't gotten to use in a while. Okay, so the Boeing CEO went and testified before Congress. And he had quite a time of it. Everybody was beating up on this poor guy. I mean, he's just covering up for the deaths of hundreds of people. I don't know why they were so hard on him. Right. But Holly really went to town on him over and over again, hammering him for still having a job. So let's read a little bit. We have some video. Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun was hammered by a Senate panel on Tuesday over the company's safety and quality lapses, a host of whistleblower allegations about company corner cutting and retaliation, and his own pay package. Calhoun, who said in March that he will step down by year's end, defended the plane maker's actions to try to improve manufacturing quality and to fix its tarnished safety reputation in the wake of a mid-air door panel blowout on an Alaska Airlines flight in January. I mean, that's really the least of it. You can't keep up with it. An engine caught on fire from a bird strike on a Boeing yesterday on the way from, I think, New Zealand to Australia, or vice versa. The company has still not named a replacement for Calhoun, who took over after its previous leader was ousted for the handling of 2 fatal Boeing crashes. And we'll get to this. I have been saying for years that guy should be in prison. Dennis Muhlenberg, he belongs in prison. He is responsible for the manslaughter, negligent homicide of hundreds of people. He knew those planes were not safe, and he let them fly anyway. He is the real-life mayor in Jaws. Quote, much has been said about Boeing's culture. We've heard those concerns loud and clear. Our culture is far from perfect, but we are taking action and making progress, Calhoun told the subcommittee. Hours before the hearing, the Senate subcommittee released whistleblower claims on Tuesday from Sam Mohawk, a quality assurance investigator at Boeing, alleging the company lost track of parts that were damaged or not up to specification, and that, quote, those parts are likely being installed on airplanes, unquote. The parts Mohawk flagged were in Boeing's Renton, Washington plant, where the company makes its best-selling 737 MAX. I never would have guessed those parts would have gone on that plane. Mohawk said he was retaliated against and that he was told by supervisors to hide evidence from the FAA, according to a memo shared by the committee on Tuesday. Dozens of important parts were stored outside during an FAA inspection. Hey, guys, we got a big rug out there? All right, sweep them under. Just put the rug over them. Including 42 rudders, as well as winglets and stabilizers, Mohawk alleged in claims with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the memo said. Cheese it, fellas, it's the cops. Boeing issued a written warning against Mohawk, saying he engaged in, quote, unacceptable/disruptive behavior or communication, according to Mohawk's complaint, which the subcommittee also made public. It said he could be discharged if the behavior continued. Mohawks also alleged the company reduced staffing during his shift, making it difficult to complete tasks. A Boeing spokeswoman said the company received the complaints Monday night and that staff are reviewing them. Quote, we continuously encourage employees to report all concerns as our priority is to ensure the safety of our airplanes and the flying public, she said. I'm sorry, that's just funny. The FAA said it has seen an increase in the number of reports from Boeing, and that's on Skinhead Jake, man. We got cut off a little bit there. We quote, "We thoroughly investigate every report, including allegations uncovered in the Senate's work," the agency said Tuesday. The FAA declined to comment on the specifics of the latest allegations. Mohawk is not testifying before the Senate subcommittee's hearing. The hearing and new whistleblower claims are further complicating matters for Boeing. The company already faces potential U.S. prosecution after the Justice Department said last month that the plane maker violated a 2021 settlement tied to 737 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019 that claimed 346 lives. A flight control system Boeing included on the MAX, the latest generation of a jet that has flown since the late 1960s, was implicated in the crashes. That agreement, which protected the company and its executives from facing criminal charges tied to the crashes, would have expired just days after the Alaska Airlines incident in January. The Department of Justice has until July 7th to decide whether to prosecute. Okay, so understand the reason that Dennis Muhlenberg is not in prison is because Boeing got a sweetheart deal where they could avoid prosecution if they corrected the problems. What's 346 people? Water under the bridge. Just don't do it again. So they are clearly in violation of that agreement. So now the question is the FAA, is the Justice Department actually going to prosecute a company that, based on my research, is the second largest donator to political campaigns, second largest donor, and the 13th largest lobbyist in Washington? Are they going to put these people in jail as they should be?
Well, you remember after the 2008 market crash, the phrase "too big to fail" came in, right? We had to bail out the banks because they're too big to fail. And then the online meme became, well, these executives are too big to jail. Too big to fail means too big to jail. Well, in the case of Boeing, you may have a case where they are too big to jail. Because as you've mentioned over and over again throughout this whole episode, what happens to the overall economic landscape in the country if you essentially prosecute the airplane manufacturers and no one wants to fly? Like, what happens if no one flies anymore?
Right. You can prosecute.
I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I'm just saying that is why that's part of why, not entirely why. They spend a lot of money lobbying the government. That's part of why they got the sweetheart deal in the first place, just because the harm to society overall would be significant if this confidence in a major airline manufacturer were shattered. Okay, so I would say that plane has flown, so to speak. There are lots of numbers now. We know we did a report on this. I'm not sure if we did it here on Jimmy's show about people are willing to pay $500 more to not fly on a Boeing. Sure.
So that's done. That's done. They've lost their reputation. Also, remember the executives they'd be prosecuting, I think mostly are not at Boeing anymore. Muhlenberg's retired. Most of these people are not there anymore. So it wouldn't have the same impact on the current management and leadership. Now, in terms of holding Boeing, the corporate entity itself, liable, I am not sure how that works, but who would really object to the government taking over Boeing at this point other than the most staunch libertarians? Because clearly Boeing is like the poster child for the idea that capitalism does not work for public needs such as an airline. This is why most of the nations in Europe have a national airline. They are not for-profit companies in the way that they are here.
Yep.
Look at why isn't Airbus having these problems? And every time I say this, I get people come out of the woodwork. I don't know if they're bots. Oh, I was a mechanic for 20 years. Airbus has problems too. Okay, get back to me when on an almost daily basis shit is falling off Airbuses.
Right.
Right. Like, I understand as this article gets into that they share some suppliers, but clearly the way these planes are being put together, which is what the whistleblowers keep citing, is not the same. They're not having their planes manufactured by the same people in the same places as Boeing is. So that seems to be where the problems are coming up. Several victims' family members attended Tuesday's hearing. Relatives of MAX crash victims met with DOJ officials late last month to urge the U.S. to prosecute. At the start of the hearing, Calhoun stood and apologized to the victims' families, many of whom held photos of their lost loved ones. We'll see that. We have that video. Quote, "We're here because we want Boeing to succeed," Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat of Connecticut, the subcommittee's chair, said at the start of the hearing on Tuesday, pointing to the jobs Boeing provides and the products it supplies to the U.S. military. Quote, "It's not enough for Boeing to shrug its shoulders and say mistakes happen," you think? Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, accused Calhoun and Boeing of strip mining the company by cutting corners and criticized his compensation package of nearly $33 million, up 45% last year from 2022. Quote, "And frankly, sir, I think it's a travesty that you are still in your job," Hawley said. The FAA has taken a hard line against Boeing, with Administrator Mike Whitaker saying the regulator will keep inspectors on the ground at the company's facilities until the agency is satisfied with safety improvements. The FAA had already halted Boeing's ability to increase production of the MAX, its best-selling plane. That's such a shame they're not allowing them to make more of these death traps. Whitaker last month said it would likely be several months before lifting that restriction. The company's shares are down nearly 33% this year through Tuesday's close, compared with a roughly 15% gain in the S&P 500. All right, so let's take a look at some of Calhoun's appearance on Capitol Hill. So this is his apology to the families of the victims of the planes that Boeing knew were unsafe and let people fly on anyway.
For as long as we're employed by Boeing. So again, I'm sorry.
Hang on, that's the end of it. Sorry about that.
I would like to apologize on behalf of all of our Boeing associates spread throughout the world, past and present, for your losses. They're gut-wrenching. And I apologize for the grief that we have caused. And I want you to know we are totally committed in their memory to work and focus on safety for as long as we're employed by Boeing.
Isn't that Barnett?
I'm sorry.
Isn't that the whistleblower in the truck on the poster that those people were holding up to him?
Might be.
Looks like it. Looks like it.
I didn't even
Let's
catch that.
Yeah, right in the middle there.
Right.
The big guy's face. That looks like him.
Yeah.
Man, you talk about a troll. Damn.
Well, they're saying at the very least, even if you don't, even if you buy the suicide, that they drove him to suicide.
I know. Yeah. Exactly.
So it's not necessarily accusing them of murder.
Right.
By definition. All right. So Josh Hawley, this was one of his better moments lately. He really kept going after the compensation package, as he should.
Any of it? I've heard that.
Senator, I stand by what I said, and I want to assure the great employees in your state that that is not the way we operate the company, and it never will be. And if you would like my chief engineer to talk about what he sees and
No,
hears,
I want to hear from you, because what I hear from you is a lot of this team does that and that team does that, and I listen to the whistleblowers, but I don't meet with them. And I've heard about all this stuff that you Congress have meddlesomely asked for because the public wants to see it. Gosh darn them, but you actually haven't supervised any of it. I've heard that. It's a lot of it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. But meanwhile, you're getting paid a heck of a lot of money. It's unbelievable. If anybody's coming out of this deal good, it's you. Why haven't you resigned?
Senator, I'm sticking this through. I'm proud of having taken the job. I'm proud of our
this
safety record, and I am
You're proud of
very
this safety
proud
record.
of our Boeing people.
You're proud of this safety record.
I am proud of every action we have taken.
Every action you've taken?
Yes, sir.
Wow. There's some news.
Okay, now remember, obviously we can't show all of this. This is in a hearing in which Blumenthal, we're about to see Blumenthal in another clip, shows the data that Boeing sent over, calls it gobbledygook, and Calhoun is forced to agree that what Boeing sent as its data is just gobbledygook, just indecipherable. He agreed that whistleblowers have been threatened and retaliated against, and he's saying he's proud of their safety record. That is amazing. That is amazing.
The manufacturing issues, the retaliation against whistleblowers, non-conforming parts, quality inspections skipped, and issues concealed from the FAA, evidence hidden, all have continued. In fact, there is near overwhelming evidence, in my view as a former prosecutor, that prosecution should be pursued.
The U.S. Justice Department.
Okay. All right. Somebody had to say it. I just never thought it was going to be him. Yeah. Okay. Yes. If they do not prosecute Boeing, that is just, I mean, it won't shock anybody. It's going to shock people. Our system is so corrupt. The shocking thing is going to be if they do the right thing and prosecute them.
Yes.
But I guess we're going to know by July 7th, according to this article, whether they're going to prosecute Boeing, as they should. Boeing should be nationalized, in my opinion. I don't see how you could argue that the military taking over Boeing is not going to be better than what Boeing is right now. And something that was not in that article that Jake took out, but it is important to note, Boeing is planning on buying Spirit, which is constructing their planes. They're planning on buying it to fix the problems. Spirit is also one of the suppliers to Airbus. So Airbus can file an injunction, from what I understand, to say, hey, we cannot have our competitor also be our supplier. This is giving them too much of a monopoly. If this is not an example of capitalism not working, I don't know what is. You've wound up in a position where you have two of the plane manufacturers that the flying public is entirely dependent on for manufacturing planes. There is no other company that is even close to being able to ramp up to supplying the industry's needs. Are both dependent on the same deeply flawed supplier that has been caught cutting corners in order to maximize its profit and hiring drunks off the street to put these planes together with Dove soap. That's a system that works. That's a marketplace that works.
I mean, if they nationalize Boeing, that'll free up a lot of advertising space on Meet the Press, right? Those Sunday morning shows. That's where you see all those Boeing ads, right? I mean, it's going to open up the ad market, right? Because they won't have to bribe the government anymore. They'll just be the government, right?
They'll be the government.
They'll just be under that umbrella. So that'll make things much more, streamlined. That's the word they use, right? Streamline everything that way.
Vertical integration.
Vertical integration, exactly. That's that business lingo I was looking for. Yeah, absolutely. So that would be something to look forward to. And yes, obviously, that is what should happen. It's a no-brainer. It's the most obvious thing in the world. And then they'll be able to sell, Viagra once again on the Sunday morning shows. Sure. You don't see ads for Viagra much anymore. Have you noticed that? I mean, I don't watch much TV anymore, but that was the big thing when it came out.
The market's saturated.
Yeah, that's true. The market has been saturated. I remember, late 90s, early 2000s. That was that was everywhere. Now you don't really see that much anymore. Yeah.
Well, because it was an ancient dream of humanity. Yes. It was right up there with the dream of having servile robots doing all the manual labor.
Yeah, you don't have to do the Kinsey thing, right? What did they used to make people do? He used to make people close their eyes and rub each other for a half an hour, right? What was there's some technique that he had? That all went out the window.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it was, but I know that now, I think part of it too was the dick pills when they first came out. They were patented to the point where they cost a bunch of money because only the name brands have them. But I think after a while on every drug, the patent expires,
they went generic,
and you can sell generic, so there's not as much money. Yeah. That's probably why. But anyway, huge advertising space will open up if they nationalize this, because it's true. I mean, and this was one of the most transparent bribes in media. the fact that Boeing runs ads on Sunday morning shows as if the average consumer watching at home is in the market for a 737.
Well, I love they really specialize. They all do all those ads on Sunday mornings. They really specialize in this, more diverse Norman Rockwell vision, right? Get a black farmer out there in the wheat field with the Boeing passing overhead, all smiling, and ain't that America? They really go for that Americana in those ads.
Indeed. Let's take care of a little business here. We got 1,026 filed in on the YouTube chat. Yeah, we got a nice crowd filing in over on Rumble as well. 852. So that's
we're
good
there.
for a left on. Beautiful.
Woo!
Yes, indeed. Eric Rousseau, member for 10 months. Thanks, Eric Rousseau. Did you see
What's
the
up,
new
Eric?
comedians in cars with Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin cruising North Korean style? So I do too. Thanks, Eric Rousseau. Dodger 12 says, we whiteys know how to exploit days off. Yes,
Fuck yeah.
indeed. Taking full advantage of that. Eric
Ain't that
Rousseau.
always the way.
Here's my money to fund war on Christmas. Bah humbug. Thank you, Eric. We are without Jake, but we are with Jake's AI app here, so we can field these Rumble rants very efficiently. So send them if you got them. All the super chats and Rumble rants help support these streams in a big way. So thank you for your support. Ken Minji, thanks for the $1. Why don't people criticize the Guardian paper more? They continue to propagate Israel propaganda.
They're like CNN, man. It really depends on the article.
Yeah, it's hit and miss. Hey, look, you know who was smeared in The Guardian? We were. We weren't smeared, but we were taken out of context. That AOC suntan article, remember? They interviewed us.
Right. Yeah, we weren't smeared, though.
We weren't smeared, but they didn't represent our argument very well. They were clearly taking her side. It was a setup. It was an ambush interview with the fake news Guardian.
The fake news media.
Yeah, exactly. His Highness getting hauled before Congress is just theater. Fauci has lied to Congress more than the number of times he's used enhanced interrogation techniques on beagles, and nothing ever happens to him. It seems like based on that hearing, though, there is bipartisan support for prosecuting. Like if Blumenthal and Hawley are on the same page, which according to what we just saw, it seems that that's a safe assumption to make, then the odds are probably looking better than against someone like Fauci. Yeah.
I think so, because you're really fucking with such a core sector of the economy. They just can't have this. They cannot have this continue.
That's true. I mean, worse than prosecuting them in terms of the economic fallout might be in the long run not prosecuting them. Because if you don't rein them in and now planes start falling out of the sky, then you have an even bigger problem. That's true.
People stop traveling, like a complete collapse in tourism. It'll be great for the to incentivize high-speed rail. I'll say that.
Yes, indeed. Which we should get on anyway. If it's Boeing, I ain't going. It's trending now. Shake my head. That's a good one.
Is it?
I like that. I like that one, Perry Anderson. Thank you. All right, we don't usually do this, but this is just one of my favorite comments of all time. Pieces of feedback. Isn't it amazing that due dissidents Jimmy, Nick, et al. Report publish news? Well, what would you rather us do? Would you rather us start our own newspaper, write the articles ourselves, and then read them to you? Like, we have to report news. We have to use articles. Otherwise, we'd have nothing to show you guys.
I mean, I do have the collected works of Allen Ginsberg, and we've talked about starting a reading series, so we might start doing that. Publish poems.
I mean, we do
publish news.
I mean, we do get the question, and I think this question was along these lines. Why do you cite mainstream sources? We do that to sort of steelman our argument so that people can't attack the source. If we use a more obscure source, then the counter argument is, well, where'd you hear that?
Using that. Right.
Exactly. When you use the quote unquote authoritative sources, you do a better job sort of protecting against those things. As Noam Chomsky, the non-late Noam Chomsky said, the non-late Noam Chomsky.
The right on time because he's a professional.
Exactly, the still kicking because he's a professional. Noam Chomsky said, didn't say you should not read mainstream news. He said you should just know how to read it. Read it with a critical eye, but don't read it at all.
Right, because they have the resources to do these investigations. Nobody else really does.
Exactly. Oh, by the way, Jacobin took down their tribute piece to Noam Chomsky.
They must have gotten slammed pretty hard.
Now when you click it, it says 404 not found or something like that. Yeah. I mean, talk about a clout chase You just go off of unconfirmed death reports so that you'll be the first article out of the gate. Wow. That is pretty low. All right, we are going to move on. We got segment number 2. This is part 3. Finally, part 3, the long-awaited part 3.
I am getting comfortable for this.
In Russell's New Orleans Tour of the South trilogy.
All right, so this I decided to work this up for Juneteenth. It's been a long time coming. I've promised the conclusion of my New Orleans trilogy. New Orleans, as anybody who's been there or done any research on it, it's a very complicated place with a very complex history. But there's a lot going on there under the surface that if you just go there as a casual tourist, you're not going to pick up on. So New Orleans, rightly, wound up probably being the centerpiece of the effort to remove Confederate monuments. You're talking about a city that I've seen different numbers, but best information I have is 68% black, that until 2017 had arguably the most prominent collection of Confederate monuments and street names of any American city. You had Lee Circle, you had Jefferson, Davis, Parkway, I think it was. So this was a report done at the time that they started to remove these monuments. And I just want to mention the very first one they did, that's what this is. This was a monument that memorialized the Crescent City White League, that during Reconstruction, because there had been a contested election, I think in 1866 or 67, there had been a contested election where they mounted an insurrection against the integrated police force and National Guard and killed 35 people. This monument, they took this plaque off later on, but the original plaque memorialized the triumph of white supremacy in the South. It literally said that on this monument. They had to remove it in the middle of the night for fear of violence and rioting. They wore bulletproof vests, and the construction workers wore masks so that they could not be recognized. They covered up their company logos so there would be no retaliation. So understand, to 2017, there was a monument in a predominantly black city to the Crescent City White League that mounted a violent insurrection against Reconstruction, killing 35 people. This was memorializing that battle, as it was called. All right, so I have a video of a local news report from the time.
Come down. New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu.
152 years and 1 month after Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered his army to Ulysses S. Grant, a statue of Lee is falling in New Orleans tonight. Omar Villafranca is there.
After 133 years of standing over New Orleans, a statue dedicated to Confederate General Robert E. Lee is the final statue
2017.
to come down. New Orleans Mayor Mitch
He should have just left it like that with a noose around his neck, not taking it down. Just kept it there. Just leave the crane there with the blue rope around his neck. That's the new statue. That's the new monument.
Confederate General Robert E. Lee is the final statue to come down. New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu.
These monuments celebrate a fictional sanitized Confederacy, ignoring the death, ignoring the enslavement.
The statue of Lee is the first one to come down in broad daylight. Under the cover of darkness, workers removed the statues for Confederate President Jefferson Davis, General P.G.T. Beauregard, and the Liberty Monument because...
All right, so just to let you know, P.G.T. Beauregard was a Louisiana general who was a prominent general in the Civil War, and actually the commanding general in the opening round of the Civil War. It was his troops that fired on Antietam to really start armed hostilities. They are still very proud of him down there. He is mentioned in quite a few historical plaques and not in an unkind way.
police say there were threats made against the crews.
If we take down these statutes and don't change to become a more open and inclusive society, then all of this would have been in vain.
Protests erupted in New Orleans when the city decided to remove the monuments. Both sides argued over whether these monuments celebrated racism or Southern heritage. Dr. Maria Ortiz with the Southern Christian Leadership Council worked for 44 years to bring the monuments down.
I would point up there and I would say, you devil, you coming down one day. I've thought of the oppression and what my grandmother and they sweat and blood down in this soil.
Businessman Frank Stewart thinks the statues should remain.
I really don't think that anybody should have the privilege of changing history, because history is truth.
I mean, you can't always judge a book by its cover, but sometimes you can. I would have guessed that guy would be against removing the statues. Yes.
I really don't think that anybody should have the privilege of changing history, because history is truth.
No word on where the statues will end up, but Anthony, the mayor, says they cannot be displayed outdoors on public property.
Omar Villafranca. Thank you, Omar.
All right. So problem solved, right? Problem solved. Now, really, the reason I wanted to do this today is you have a lot of people who, partly because, and this is why I speak out so much against the people who grift off of claims of white supremacy and structural racism. The reason I get so angry about people like Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo is because they discredit a legitimate argument with their advocacy of it, because it's so clear that they are just grifters making money off racial division. But I challenge you by the end of this to say, oh, no, we don't have these problems anymore in America. And this is a really good example, because the impression you would get is, oh, well, they took down the monuments. Happy ending, right? So I can now from here, these are my own photos. All right, so that's Lee Circle now. The statue of Lee, you can see, is gone. But just one block away from Lee Circle is the Memorial Hall Civil War Museum. Now, they have changed the name several times, but what it really is a memorial to the Confederate cause. That is what it is. And I didn't realize that when I went. I didn't go there to see, oh my God, this white supremacist museum. I took it at its word. I thought it was a fucking Civil War museum. No. Okay, so
formerly the Yankee Tomfoolery Museum. Now,
formerly the War of Northern Aggression Museum. So, all right. So you walk in. So this is what you see. All right. And understand, I'm not saying that there's no place in this world for a museum about the Confederacy. I mean, sure there is. I mean, it is a part of history. There is no place for a museum that celebrates the Confederacy, which they will deny. And I'm going to demonstrate very clearly that is a very weak argument to say that that's not what it is. Okay, so you have things in here that, sure, all right, I mean, this stuff is interesting. The firearms, the uniforms, medical kits with a history of the doctor who had it. This was like a 19th century Viewmaster. It's kind of steampunk, made out of wood, but it gave you kind of the three-dimensional view. All right. I mean, that's all interesting enough. Then you start to notice things. Okay, so this is a list of all of the reunions of Confederate soldiers. They had reunions into 1951. I guess the last of them died off after that. But these are all the locations and dates of Confederate soldier reunions. And then you see the poster advertising the Confederate reunions. Start to say, It's kind of seems like they're a little nostalgic for the good old days of the Confederate reunions, but okay.
This is the moment of the Scientology film screening when you realize the door is locked from the outside.
Creepy people in 19th century dress start to close
Yeah,
in around
yeah,
you.
exactly, yeah.
Well, sugar,
Yeah.
you're a Yankee, ain't you?
Yeah.
All right,
This is like
so
Get Out for northern white liberals.
all right, so the will to fight. Now, this is where you really start to see the museum's agenda. Now, I am a museum freak. I'm the kind of person who will read pretty much all the placards within reason, especially in a small museum like this. So I can tell you this museum definitely had an agenda in what it included in its description of the Civil War and what it left out. And this is an excellent example. So this is about who fought on both sides. I thought I might need my glasses here. I'm gonna throw these on.
Yeah, it's pretty tiny.
All right. The average soldier was a single male native-born farmer between 18 and 39 who stood 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed about 140 pounds. Most soldiers averaged just 26 years of age, while the majority on both sides gave their occupation as farmer. Union troops alluded to more than 300 different careers, including accountant, surveyor, and so on. Non-farming Confederate troops listed occupations that included carpenter, all right, and so on. While the majority of the men on both sides were of the various Protestant faiths, many, especially from within Louisiana, were Roman Catholic. 7,000 men of the Jewish faith fought for the North, and 3,000 fought for the South. Large numbers of immigrants swelled the ranks of both sides, particularly in the North. Almost 1/4 of the Union soldiers were immigrants, including 200,000 Germans, 150,000 Irish, 45,000 English, 15,000 Canadians, and lesser numbers of French, Norwegians, Italians, Mexicans, and Poles. The South mustered fewer immigrants to the colors, but thousands of Irish, Germans, British, French, Canadians, Dutch, and Austrians entered the Confederate Army at different times. Keaton, it's very strange. It's very strange. It seems like they left somebody out. It seems like somebody was forgotten in this very extensive list. You're talking about Poles and Canadians and Brits and Germans and Jews. They seem to have forgotten somebody in a war over slavery, which they deny in another place. We'll get into that. They didn't mention any black people fighting on either side. They just didn't mention them. They just, poof, they just disappeared from history. So is this because there were so few? No. By the time the war ended in 1865, about 180,000 black men had served as soldiers in the U.S. Army. This was about 10% of the total Union fighting force. Most, about 90,000, were former or contraband enslaved people from the Confederate States. About half of the rest were from the loyal border states, and the rest were free black people from the North. 40,000 black soldiers died in the war, 10,000 in battle, and 30,000 from illness or infection. Okay. So let's say that this is really about what a lot of them will say that this museum is about. It's about Southern heritage. It's about the Southern heritage. It has nothing to do with racism. And so they didn't even want to talk about the North, even though they did in detail, except for this detail. But hey, there were black Confederates that they didn't mention. That's pretty weird in a Confederate museum. You don't want to mention blacks that fought alongside you. This from The Root, is not from Southern Cracker Weekly. This is from The Root. Between 3,000 and 6,000 served as Confederate soldiers. Another 100,000 or so blacks, mostly slaves, supported the Confederacy as laborers, servants, and teamsters. They built roads, batteries, and fortifications, manned munitions factories, essentially did the Confederacy's dirty work. We know that blacks made up more than half the toilers at Richmond's Tredegar Ironworks and more than 75% of the workforce at Selma, Alabama's Naval Ordnance Plant. And slaves grew the crops that fed the Confederacy. As Frederick Douglass noted, blacks were the stomach of the rebellion. Okay. All right. So again, so let's say clearly this museum does not want to talk about slavery. All right. So let's say that's what it's about. They don't want to talk about slavery. What's particularly weird in a museum in New Orleans, in Louisiana, to not talk about this is because of its unique and unusual history of having been governed first by France and then by Spain rather than by England. Louisiana was much more likely to have Confederate blacks than anywhere else in the country because you had more free blacks of the planter class than you had anywhere else. The most prominent example of free black Confederate troops is the Louisiana Native Guards based in New Orleans. Now, remember, the main hall, which you will see, is full of the flags of all the Louisiana regiments, but not this one, not the Louisiana Native Guards. I didn't mention that. Why not? Why not? I mean, I would think it would reinforce your argument that the war wasn't about slavery, right? I mean, it wouldn't prove it, but I mean, you could use it, but they don't. Some 1,500 men enlisted, and early in the war, they announced their determination to, quote, take arms at a moment's notice and fight shoulder to shoulder with other citizens in defense of the city. Part of the state militia, they marched in review through the streets with white soldiers, but they were never ordered into combat. And when Union forces captured New Orleans in the spring of 1862, they switched sides and declared their loyalty to the Union. General Benjamin Butler, commander of the Union forces in New Orleans, interviewed some Native Guards and asked them why they had served a government created to perpetuate slavery. They, quote, dared not refuse, they told Butler, according to the book General Butler in New Orleans, published in 1864 by the biographer James Parton. By serving the Confederates, they hoped to advance a little nearer to equality with whites. Many, if not most, free blacks in and around New Orleans aligned themselves with the planter class in hopes of greater rights. In this sense, the region more closely resembled the Caribbean than the Cotton South, with a comparatively large population of elite free blacks, most of them light-skinned. Some were slave owners, and among the wealthiest free blacks in the country, as the economic historian Juliet Walker has documented. Okay, so this is very focused not only on the Confederacy, but on the Louisiana experience during the Civil War. Completely erased. Does not appear, not a mention of this in the museum whatsoever. So, it's kind of like when Putin said when they wouldn't let him into NATO, well, you say it's not about us, but it seems kind of like it's about us. Well, you say it's not about excluding black people, but it kind of seems like it's about excluding black people. Even when they fought on your side. So this is why I mention I'm a museum freak and I pretty much read everything. I pretty much literally read every single one of these placards in the entire museum. Few placards that were just biographical details of a random soldier or the construction of a ship I didn't read, but anything like this that gave an overview. So I can tell you with some confidence, this plaque is literally the only place where they mention slavery in a Civil War museum. It was the only place where I saw the word slavery used. So what do they say about the causes of the Civil War? Let's see. The northern states did not favor the expansion of the institution of slavery into the western territories, now those states north of Texas and between Arkansas and California. The agricultural southern states did favor the expansion and believed that the duty of the federal government was to defend the nation, not intervene in matters they felt better left to the individual states. Well, that sounds reasonable. The drumbeat of the 1850s was augmented by a small but organized abolitionist movement that stirred northern sentiment against the South. Now note what they're implying here, right? This was just one of those things where they had a kind of, disagreement amongst themselves. And it was a small number of abolitionists, but they turned those northern Yankees against us with their propaganda. The intense political and ideological strife between North and South increased dramatically in the years before the war. The John Brown raid and the hotly contested election of 1860 only fanned the flames of coming war. In 1859, abolitionist and religious zealot named John Brown attacked and seized the United States arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. His goal was to obtain weapons from the arsenal and free the slaves in Harper's Ferry. He was soon captured by a company of Marines under the command of Lieutenant Israel Green. The military operation to put down the raid was led by Colonel Robert E. Lee. I never knew that. Did you know that, Keaton?
No.
Brown was sentenced to death and was later hanged in Charleston, Virginia, now West Virginia. Quote, I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. Crazy religious fanatic and that small group of abolitionists who stirred up the North against us. So that's it. That's it. That is what they have to say about slavery in this entire museum. There is not another word about it. I feel pretty confident in saying. Now, if you have any doubt at this point in your journey through this museum of what the point of view of this museum is, right behind you, they're playing a video on a continuous loop of the glorious history of the museum and of the lost cause. Now, we can't play any of that video because we're afraid they'll come for us. But I will show you one screenshot of some text. Memorial Hall continues to stand as a monument to its founders and as a repository of cherished stories and memorabilia from the war between the states. I shit you not. The war between the states. When I was studying actually for the New Orleans tour guide exam, it was described as the war between the states, although not on the test itself, to be fair. All right, so in the main hall, this is the kind of thing you're going to see. Like I said, all the regimental flags, except the Black Regiment. Very loving portraits of wonderful people like Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, the aforementioned PGT Beauregard, local hero. And this is the view from the upper gallery, where the widow and daughter of Jefferson Davis donated over 20 trunks of his personal effects to the museum. So, it's funny. This is almost like somebody made a movie called CSA that was like an alternate history America where the South had won. That's kind of what this is, because you've unless you're into this, you've never seen these kind of like glorified portraits of Civil War battles from the South's point of view. But this was in Jefferson Davis's office, portrays Stonewall Jackson in a triumphant moment.
Well, this would just be like the inside of an IHOP if they won. Like they would all be decorated like that. It'd just be standard decor.
This would be your neighborhood Denny's.
Yeah, Denny's, America's Diner. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this was a gift. The Catholic Church being on the right side of history, like they do. This was a gift from the Pope to Jefferson Davis. While after he had even lost the war, he was in prison. The church was apparently very sympathetic to the lost cause. This is his family Bible, his personal effects, and just to show you how much they're sanctifying the Confederacy, you can see they put in stained glass windows, and this was paid for by the Daughters of the Confederacy. They actually paid for this stained glass. And to really bring the point home, the final section of the museum gets into the Reconstruction period. And the narrative, they're careful not to get too overt these days. But it very much is the narrative of an oppressed Southern people resisting any way that they can the oppressive presence of their Northern occupiers. So this, it was illegal to represent the Stars and Bars during Reconstruction. So this was a painter who wove the stars and bars into a seemingly innocuous floral print. And the tone of the narrative about it is very much like the point of view of a people who had been oppressed during this period and what they did to resist. Okay, so this is quite remarkable, especially when you consider that the city is 68% black, that such a museum still stands. I mean, just this, no question, glorifying the Confederacy. And if you have any doubt, if you still say, it's just a museum. All right, so here's what you can find in the gift shop before you leave. You know, if you just want a little portrait of Jefferson Davis hanging in your home, pick up one of those. If you want to impress your friends at aforementioned Denny's with your CSA belt buckle, you can get one of those. You can get a Stars and Bars flag. Mugs with quotes. So now anyone who says this is a history museum, well, you know, they have museums at Auschwitz. I don't think they have any mugs with Goebbels saying people will believe any lie as long as you make it big enough. I mean, clearly you're glorifying these people when you're and look at what they're quoting from Jefferson Davis. Neither current events nor history show that the majority rule or ever did rule. Wow, that is very fucking inspirational. Jefferson Davis, who, by the way, when the Emancipation Proclamation was passed, declared it the most execrable law ever passed by man and promised to kill or enslave any black soldier who got captured behind enemy lines. That's the guy who they're putting on a mug here. Little cameo magnets in case you're a cheapskate. Little Christmas ornament. Little Stars and Bars Christmas ornament for the Stormfront crowd. Stars and Bars bookmark, patches. Okay, so how does this exist? How does this exist in a majority black city? Where does the money come from? Where does the support for this come from? Well, in New Orleans, and I'm sure in a lot of other places in the South, but I'm only really familiar with this region because I've spent so much time in this particular city. The old planter aristocracy not only never went away, they still run that city. And they are really the founders of the thing that it is best known for, that if you're a tourist who's visited New Orleans, I'd say chances are better than even that you went there for Marti Gras, right? You probably went there for Marti Gras. So this, I got to say, I'm a little ashamed, man, because I've been to Marti Gras 3 times. And it was only this time that I really started to become aware of what the origins of Marti Gras were. So this is one of the displays here. This is, okay, so the parades are sponsored by Crews, Krewe. And the first of these crews was called the Crew of Comus, which still exists. And originally, Marti Gras, it came from a European tradition of it was kind of a topsy-turvy day where people would go and kind of make fun of the rich and throw garbage at people. And right, it was kind of that, one of those just festival, release all the demons for the year, right? The Crew of Comus were leading wealthy citizens who got together to emulate the aristocracies of Europe and to bring dignity and order to the Mardi Gras festivities and to quiet down the poor and have them show deference to their betters. So in 1857, they started the tradition of the Mardi Gras parades, where, as you will see in my own footage, some traditions still continue. Obviously, they were pulling carriages. Those were the floats then. And you had blacks, often slaves, called flambeaux, carrying flames. And they would throw trinkets to the crowd. That's where that tradition comes from. So after the Civil War, the crews that existed, the original crews like Comus, like Rex, we'll get into that. They were avowed white supremacists. They supported that insurrection we mentioned earlier, that they had a monument there too. Many were members of the White League, which continued for quite a while. Many were members of the Ku Klux Klan. So this was their celebration, and who they celebrated in 1884. So Comus had reigned without a queen since 1857. In 1884, a ball was held at the French Opera House. The organization honored Mildred Lee and Mary Lee, daughters of General Robert E. Lee, Verena Winnie Davis, daughter of Confederate President Jefferson Davis, Nanny Hill, daughter of General Daniel H. Hill, and Julia Jackson, daughter of General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson. Though not officially designated as such at the time, the Daughters of the Confederacy are considered to have been Comus's first court, and Mildred Lee the first queen of Comus. So to understand how just deranged this gets, they have a court, right? And you have maids in waiting, and they emulate all the aristocratic traditions of Europe, but they'll get local prominent children of prominent citizens to be the court and the maids in waiting, and that sort of thing. So they have the original jewels. So when you get thrown these Marti Gras beads, that's an emulation of. You're getting the version for the poors, imitating what the richies get, right? Okay, so again, in this day and age, these people who talk about white supremacy and structural racism, their heads are stuck in the past. It might have been like that in the 19th century, but things have changed now. Oh. Elite white New Orleans. Mardi Gras hasn't freed itself from vestiges of racism. The oldest crews, Comus, Momus, Rex, and Proteus, were founded in the 19th century when New Orleans was a wealthy port and white men controlled the town. Today, New Orleans is a majority black city. Most politicians have been black since Dutch Morial was elected mayor in 1978. But the elite so-called Old Line Carnival crews remain all male and almost exclusively white. City Council tried to make the crews diversify in 1991. It passed an anti-discrimination ordinance that required parading crews to integrate. Rex extended invitations to 3 black men. Comus, Momus, and Proteus chose to cease parading. Proteus reinstituted its parade in 2000, signing an affidavit that it did not discriminate on the basis of race. Comus and Momus have remained off the streets. The overall myth, quote, the overall myth is that somehow New Orleans is more racially progressive or laissez-faire than the rest of the South. This is the story that New Orleans loves to tell itself, said Max Sikakini, an anthropologist and musicologist at Tulane University. And when you go back into the historical record, it's just not true. It's not complicated. The origins of Mardi Gras are Confederate explicitly, Sakakini said. Although Comus and Momus keep their members secret, tax records reveal these men run banks, sit on boards, and have a hand in nearly every aspect of civic life in New Orleans. Activist Flozell Daniels Jr. called them the shadow government of New Orleans. Plus, fancy elite balls shape the lives of young people. That's what worried Rhonda Broussard, founder and CEO of Beloved Community, a group that works to create racial and economic equity. The society that is grooming these young people is holding onto white supremacy, she said. It's not a question of a dying legacy. Groups like these are actively continuing that culture. So how are they continuing that culture? Well, at the close of Mardi Gras, Comus traditionally meets up with Rex. They do this at the Marriott, and they have a big ball. So was Comus driven out of the public square for deciding not to parade sooner than integrate? No, this is on public television every year in New Orleans. So you want to see some of the dorkiest white shit you ever saw in your life? There's a little clip from, I believe this was the 2018 close of festivities. So the crew of Rex and the crew of Comus come together in this ritual.
And there's the Queen's mother.
Okay, so now I want to point out. All right, so if you see the guy on the left, he's got a full face mask. Okay, so when Rex agreed, they invited 3 black people to join their crew to fulfill this requirement. But technically, they're secret societies. So Comus, because they never went along with that, they never had to reveal their membership. So that's why he has a full face mask on. So their membership, it is the creepy white supremacist secret society where they fully mask themselves so you won't know who the members are. So that is your king of Comus for that year. Okay. So to give you an idea of what kind of an event this is, so we're not going to read through this, but you can see this is like the old society pages, right? This is the local newspaper in New Orleans. Maids of honor were Mrs. Sophie Wilson, right? It's very much that. Now, as you know, as most of you know, I was at Marti Gras this year. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what you see that does continue these traditions. And I will say, as a white dude from the North, seeing shit like this, like, what is that, the fucking Klan? Is it the Klan riding out here? What the hell is that? You know, you have these guys in these masks that look like the Klan, basically. So take a look, and you'll see it. You'll see in this clip horse riders and also still black torchbearers or flambeaux. You also see a lot of military presence in the parade, and you see a lot of all black high school and college marching bands are represented, but not on the floats. On the floats, it's pretty much still all white people up on these floats, and these were the parades of the crew of Morpheus and the crew of Bacchus. So here you can see, look, man, like, did I see a kind of evocation of the Old South in this? I mean, sure I did. But having researched it, I realized that was not an accident, because it is rooted in those customs. Now, eventually, blacks formed their own crew, the Zulu crew. This is a little bit of what you see at the Zulu parade, which again, I mean, you choose to put on makeup that has its origin in minstrel shows. I mean, it's not for me to judge, but clearly somebody wearing that kind of makeup and that kind of wig, it's rooted in some very ugly traditions. Now, finally, just to wrap this up, when you want to talk about structural racism or systemic racism, you might want to say, well, you know, it's the South, it's peculiar, you have a very old, dark history down there. But I think nothing could show more the real existence of a blindness to a racial perspective that is woven through even things that we just wouldn't really look twice at. All right, so now you've just toured that museum as much as you're going to without going there yourself, right? So I want to show you how travel guides describe that museum. Lonely Planet. Travel guide and good and really kind of hip standing, right? That's the hip travel guide. Tattered gray uniforms, rebel swords, and faded diaries. This collection of Civil War memorabilia pays homage to the Confederacy and locals who fought for that cause. The museum used to be a center of Confederate apologia. Today, it's been largely politically corrected. Note the different names it's known by, but it remains a collection of things as opposed to a contemporary interpretation-driven educational museum. With that said, many of the personal effects are fascinating. Okay, so it's not what Confederate apologia. So this is what people mean when they say you need to get woke for real, right? Because a lot of people will read this and say, oh yeah, no, that museum does not have Confederate connotations. This Lonely Planet. Is it only Lonely Planet? Is that an outlier? Nope. Fromers. Here is the Confederate flag, that hot button epicenter of controversy, displayed with no glamour or judgment. It's a history museum, after all, and a good one, if you're interested in the Civil War or architecture. The unusual circa 1891 press brick Romanesque building is a stunner, inside and out. Among thousands of relics, the second largest collection in the U.S. are weapons, uniforms, portraits, and the personal effects of Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee. Of note, an elegant piano, saved from a fine Mississippi home pre-raising that was carried into a trench mid-battle for safekeeping, where it was protected and played as cannonballs flew. Also, a great seal of the short-lived Confederate States of America circa 1862, and an Alabama Legion battle flag with 83 painstakingly mended bullet holes. Now, to read that, you would think, hey, it's just neutral at worst. This is what people mean when they say racism is woven throughout the culture and most people are blind to it. Because if you've actually been to that museum and you read this, you have got to be very unconscious to the connotations of a museum like that to give it that kind of a review. You know, people talk about, well, this person got accused unfairly. They got that. Okay, yeah, that happens, and I talk about it. This is part of why I want to do a segment like this. I feel like it's an only Nixon can go to China thing. You know, I have no patience for that kind of shit, for false accusations, for unfair ginning up of racial tension. But I've always said in those segments, it's not that I don't think there's systemic racism. I just think this is a distraction from the systemic racism that really exists. When travel guides of good standing like Lonely Planet or Fromers are going to describe what I just showed you as politically neutral, having changed their ways, yeah, how do you interpret that as anything but a white supremacist point of view being so woven into the culture that it's invisible to people? Because you talk about professors who might get unjustly accused for stupid reasons. And again, I'm not shy about talking about that. But look at all the things like that that don't get called out. Look at all the things that don't get asked to change. Fromers and Lonely Planet should not be describing that museum that way. They should be telling people to stay as far away from it as possible. My big question is why there are no protests outside, and maybe they're afraid of that shadow government that is described in that article that is the real power running New Orleans. You want to understand why a city that is majority black, 50% of the black people are in poverty. Well, they're not actually running it. They might be the political class, but they're not running the money. He who controls the coinage, right, controls the society. Well, the people at that ball behind those masks are actually running the banks down there.
Yeah, and certain hegemonic points of view have a way of enforcing themselves no matter what the popular will of the population is. We got a real taste of that. We're getting a real taste of that now. Whenever you see an Israel-Gaza debate, that's the same thing. I mean, that is certainly a Western supremacist, and I would argue a white supremacist ideology. The idea that European Jews have a right to settle in Arab land because the white people didn't want them, so we'll force them on the brown people. What are they going to do, right? And there is no real questioning of that allowed in certain circles. And so there are certain ideas that you're just not supposed to question in certain circles. You know, this is a trivial example, but like one of the woke things that happened, the quote unquote woke things that happened, was that band Lady Antebellum, after the George Floyd murder, changed their name to Lady A. because Antebellum was considered
sure
pretty racist. And I thought it was pretty weird to have a mainstream band called Lady Antebellum before George Floyd.
Right.
I'm like, why is it okay to name a popular band that? Like, why is nobody saying what? Like, you couldn't think of any other name besides that?
Lady Luftwaffe SS.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, I thought that was strange. Now they changed it after George Floyd because, the tastes of America changed. But there's a certain just unacknowledged currents of racism that runs underneath the society that just kind of goes on. I love that. That's good. I love that. Lady IDF. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, exactly. Like, there are certain things you look at and you think of a little while like, huh, what is that? And they go unquestioned all the time. Yeah. It's not uncommon. It really is not uncommon. It seems uncommon because you don't often think about it. Like, that's how ingrained it is. Because it doesn't always catch your eye. There's a lot of things that take 2 or 3 double takes to catch your eye. That Lady Antebellum thing caught my eye at the first time I heard it. All right. And I didn't make a big deal out of it. I know a few of their songs. They're good, good bands. I didn't boycott them or anything. But I'm like, yeah, this is weird.
Well, that is the real meaning of woke. When I went to college, even as late as the 90s, there was still that, macho association with the Stars and Bars, man. Guy across the hall from me had the Stars and Bars. And honestly, this is where I feel the intersection of class and race is complicated, because the person I related to most on my dorm was a black girl.
Right.
Because we both didn't come from anything. So we used to make fun of everybody's dorkiness. These were very dorky, naive white kids to us. Like, we were able to bond on that. But at the same time, you want to talk about what the difference is. I never thought anything of that flag. But I was sitting with her one day in that dorm room, and she said to me quietly, I know this place isn't for me. Look at that flag.
Right.
And I was like, man, I never even paid attention to the fact that flag is there.
Right.
That's the meaning of woke. That woke me up. Like, oh shit. Right. Why is that supposed to be cool or macho or acceptable to have a flag? You don't fly a Nazi flag.
Right.
How is that different? You got Germans walking around who feel bad about the lost cause of the Nazis. We don't coddle them.
Right. Right. Yeah. They don't have their own gift shops. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. It's not acceptable to have a portrait of Himmler on your bookmark.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. All right. We will move on. Hope you guys all enjoyed that piece. That was very well put together. So round of applause for Russ in the chat. Round of applause in the YouTube and the Rumble chat. 1428 over on YouTube and 971 over on Rumble. Eric Rousseau, we need a national holiday for tan people so AOC's suntan lobby can cash in on the holiday scam. Yes, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Thank you. Boeing goes out of business. Airbus within 5 years. It'll be like the 1950s. Only the wealthy can afford to fly, plus the odd priest or none. Thank you. Dodger 12 says, fly private. The Kerry family does and loves it. Yes, that's a good idea. If only that solution were more obvious. Let's see. That guy commenting about reporting news just wants to see y'all blow each other. Thank you for having our backs, Shine-a-Billy. Appreciate that. All right, let's pause quickly here. We still got a couple more segments to do, but why don't we pause here for a word from our sponsors. Let me just pull this up here. Where is it? Here it is. There we go. If you'd like to support this program, you can do so by becoming a patron. That's right. You can go to patreon.com/DoDissidents, or you can join our Substack, DoDissidents.substack.com. You can also join our locals at DoDissidents.locals.com. But our patrons are the backbone of this program. Our next Patreon member stream is going to be Monday, this upcoming Monday. I think we're going to do that one at night, correct? Monday at 8 p.m. That's what we have settled on.
Yes.
So you get access to 2 member streams per month. You also get call-in access to our post-show weekly Q&As over on Rumble. You get your name up in lights here, and all of our live events will be recorded and streamed on Rumble. So if you will get access to both of those full-length live shows that we did in New York City full and uncensored. If you go to patreon.com/DoDissidents and become a member, it helps us out tremendously. That is what allows us to keep the project afloat. You guys are the backbone of the show. You can join our Substack, DoDissidents.substack.com or DoDissidents.locals.com. Perks are the same across all three membership platforms, starting at just $5 a month. We do our best to make it worth your while. If you're watching on Rumble, the easiest way to join our locals is to click the bright red join button underneath the video screen. That takes you to the locals page. Thank you very much for your support. And if you want to see us go to Dearborn, Michigan to do a documentary on the abandoned Biden movement, givesendgo.com/DoDissidents is how you do it. We need to beef up that fund in order to afford that trip. We already have the Chicago trip paid for, but if we're going to do this other one, we got to get some funds in the special project fund. So you can help us there by going to givesendgo.com/DoDissidents. Thank you all very much for your support. Let's take a few more Rumble rants here. If you want to avoid crowds, you might like Michigan, says $1 Million Trooper. Thank you. Silver lining of a depression that started before the neolibs gutted the economy. I never truly experienced traffic jams until I left. I drove through Michigan in May of 2009, so just about 8 months after the financial crash. And yeah, that was a very sad scene. No doubt about that. Mac Truck, thanks for the $5. U.S. government will take over Boeing and rechristen the company the American Luftwaffe, then send to Ukraine, then Stalingrad. Not good. Thank you, Mac Truck. Appreciate that.
As far as that goes, what are you saying? We're going to turn Boeing to militarized purposes?
Right.
We're there already. That's the whole basis of their business. This is part of why I say that it is a great example of capitalism not working, because from what I've read, they can't really run it profitably. Some things aren't profitable, but they are needed by the public. What do you do with something like that? The public needs to fund it.
Yeah.
You cannot have something that vital and that dangerous to get wrong in the hands of private industry.
Right. Indeed. Let's see here. Kim and G, U.S. government will take over Boeing, rechristened El Al in honor of Israeli masters. Thank you, Kim and G. Appreciate that.
Like I said, we're already paying them to do that shit.
That's right. That's right. Why is Jill Stein avoiding Jimmy Dore? Says Richard. Thanks for the $1.99. Look, they're not interested in growing their ranks. That's pretty obvious. That's pretty obvious. That was obvious when Cornell went on Jimmy Dore. That's why I told you. I said my first take on that was the Greens told him they don't like Jimmy. They don't like the cohort of people who watch Jimmy, and we don't want to ally with them, so give him a hard time. I'm telling you, I don't know that for a fact, but I would bet everything I own that he was under orders not to give Jimmy an easy time on that interview. And now Jill Stein is, representing the Greens. And, look, they're not on the ballot in New York. That's end of conversation. That's right. The end of the conversation. Right. If you're not on the ballot in I would argue the second most populous solid blue state in the country, which it is, because there's California. And then the two most populous states beside that, I think, are now Florida and Texas, but those are red states. So if you're not on the ballot in the second most populous blue state in the country, you're not hitting 5%, you're not doing anything. It's over. That's game over in terms of that being a serious campaign.
Well, not to mention, how long have they been around? Yeah. How long have they been at this? If that's not a psyop, I don't know what is, man. And again, I don't think it's that Jill Stein is consciously misleading people. I think the intelligence services allow them to exist so that they can mislead people.
Yeah. John Freese. Hi, Russell. Have you read The Moviegoer by New Orleans author Walker Percy? It's about existentialism by imagining what you see as a movie. Interesting. Sounds like an interesting concept. Thank you, John Freese.
I think that's called dissociation. It happens to people who have been traumatized.
Amadeus, thanks for the $5, and you call it steampunk despite the fact it is obviously grilled. Thank you. Yes. John Locke, thanks for the $20 super sticker, John Locke. That's very kind of you. Appreciate that. Thank you all for your contributions this afternoon, helping us put these shows together. All right, moving on. Got a couple more things to get to before we wrap today. There was a Munk debate north of the border in Toronto, the famous Munk debates. They got Douglas Murray back to debate Mehdi Hasan and Gideon Levy. The resolution in question was Zionism, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And so it's obvious which side Douglas Murray's on, obvious which side Mehdi Hasan was arguing. Mehdi's debate partner was an Israeli journalist, a non-Zionist Israeli journalist named Gideon Levy, who did a remarkable job in this debate. Now, they lost, of course, which we'll get to in the next segment here. But for purposes of this piece, I want to show you guys one of the most telling exchanges of this debate, in my opinion, because I watched the whole thing, was a question about student protests. So here the question goes to Douglas Murray, what to make of the pro-Palestine student protests, and here's his answer, and then we'll get the rebuttal.
Does college campuses and what's happening on college campuses here in North America, Douglas, say about this debate right now?
Well, it says that a young generation has been lied to in significant numbers and with a sense of ferocity and extremism, which we should all abhor.
I'm sorry, this guy sounds just like Hannibal Lecter. He really sounds like Hannibal Lecter. Well, Clarice, of course, it's anti-Semitic, Clarice.
Well, he's
Have you
really
ever found yourself on the receiving end of reverse racism, Clarice? This guy sounds like fucking Hannibal Lecter. He sounds exactly like him if you close your eyes. He could be, animated version of Silence of the Lambs. If Anthony Hopkins can't do it because he's too old, this guy would nail it.
How do you feel about settler colonial projects, Clarice?
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
Well, he's really trying to be William F. Buckley.
Yes. Yes, we've made that point in the past, and that's certainly true.
I mean, it's possible that these college campus kids didn't get the memo from the other side in their desperate attempt not only to reframe anti-Zionism, but also anti-Semitism. It's very strange to me, isn't it, that if anti-Zionism isn't anti-Semitic, why do all these kids who've never protested about anything else before in the world stage suddenly turn up at Columbia and chase Jewish students with "Go back to Poland" or Ukraine? Why is it Jewish students at universities here in Toronto and Montreal who get chased by mobs and shouted down by mobs screaming anti-Semitic slurs? They're not even bothering to cover over.
Okay. Again, citation needed for that. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
They
just pull this stuff out of their asses.
The entire media is on the same page that Jewish students are being harassed on campus, yet we're seeing no footage of this whatsoever. No documented reports of this whatsoever.
That girl almost lost her eye, no?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You got girls saying we were stabbed in the eye when video shows, at best, she was accidentally poked in the eye with the end of a flag because there were marchers marching through a tight corner, right? So what are you talking about, number one? Number two, you know what you never seen students protest before? Israel. The opposition makes that point brilliantly, so I won't step on that. But that's something that we want to keep in mind here as well.
I mean, they very rarely anymore remember to say, "Oh, I meant Zionist." They're revealing themselves all the time, and it's because...
Where?
First of all, they've been lied to.
Where are they revealing themselves? Again, where's the video for this?
My experience is protesters are extremely careful because they know everyone's dying to get them on camera saying something anti-Semitic. They're very careful not to make that equation. Not to say Jews, but to say Zionists, Israel.
This is the version of Rachel Maddow saying that the Bernie supporters threw chairs at the Nevada State Convention and showing no footage of that. They cut to WWE B-roll because they had nothing on camera. They had a lot of camera footage that day, but none corroborating her story. Right. So again, where are the examples of this happening? Where? Because we know they would be everywhere if they happened.
You have what Max and Aaron exposed, where clearly these were like undercover Jews.
Yeah, infiltrators. Yeah.
We should do October 7th 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had that. You had the person who had like the sign about they should bomb the Zionists, who may very well have been a plant.
Almost
doesn't seem like there's ever been any follow-up on that person, and they'd love to dox them.
Well, they were there alone, and they were asked not to hold the sign.
Right.
So those are
exactly.
two huge red flags.
Those are like the only two things I've seen. Now, am I going to say, oh, nothing else has happened? Sure, man. I mean, you're talking about protests involving millions of fucking people.
Right.
Of course something like that's going to happen, but I've been to these protests. Is that common? Not at all. Just like when you had a Sanders rally, you generally would not have heard Hillary is a bitch because everybody knew they wanted to get you saying that on camera.
They wanted to hear you say that. Exactly. And if you notice, look at how many notes he has on him. He has a whole book of notes. He has papers under the water pitcher there. He referred to notes the whole time. Notice he didn't have specific examples to cite what he's talking about right now. Doesn't read off, and there was this incident at the University of X. Nothing. Just makes these claims and moves right on.
Secondly, there are a very large number of them who are, I would say that they fall into two categories, the sinister and the silly. The sinister are the ones who know exactly which river they're chanting about and exactly which sea. And they want the eradication of the world's only Jewish state. And they think they're the good guys. The silly.
All right, but before we move on from that, you know who also knows exactly which river and exactly which sea? Israel, the Zionists. From the river to the sea, the Zionists coined that phrase to describe their plans to ethnically purge that land of the Palestinians. So
well,
yes,
yeah,
go ahead.
Well, and at core, this is where this whole argument is just crazy. They are the invaders.
Right.
They are the invaders. Douglas Murray, I think Hasan mentioned this at one point. Murray is one of the Dawkins New Atheist people.
Right.
You don't believe that God gave this land to the Jews.
Right.
So
He's an atheist.
So what are you talking about that they have ancestry there thousands of years? So do the Palestinians. In fact, it is illegal to get a DNA test in Israel. You have to get a court order. You have to get permission for it. Has to be about paternity, that kind of thing. You have to go to court for that. Why? Because the Palestinians, in much greater proportions, are Jews. Like if you want to find the historic Hebrews, they're the Palestinians.
Right.
They stayed.
Yes.
First
The
they
bloodline.
converted to Christianity. Later they converted to Islam. They're the Jews. These Jews who came in from Eastern Europe, they may be Khazars. That's a theory. But I've had a DNA test. Not a fucking drop of Middle Eastern blood came up in my DNA. I'm sure that's the case with 99.999% of Ashkenazi Jews. The only exceptions would probably be the ones who have some Sephardic blood, which are the darker Jews.
Right.
They're the ones who, like, there was a guy at Columbia who started this academic year calling for climate emergency. And then
so the first were the sinister ones who knew what they were doing, and now these are the silly ones in his mind.
They're the ones who, like, there was a guy at Columbia who started this academic year calling for climate emergency. And then Hamas attacked Israel, and suddenly he was for Hamas. He has a sort of belly button piercing, and I think he's queers for Palestine, or, as I say, chickens for KFC. And these students are, I'll put it straight, they are desperate for a cause. They're desperate for meaning in their lives. They have searched and scoured the land looking for meaning and purpose, and instead of learning something good to do with their lives, they've decided they will do this incredibly simplistic thing. Everything in the world is oppressor, oppressed, occupier, occupied.
No, not everything in the world is oppressor, oppressed, occupier, occupied. But those terms do specifically apply to this situation, which is why they're protesting this and not other random causes, which you accused him 2 minutes ago. Well, they weren't protesting anything before. Now he contradicts himself. Notice he says, well, they were protesting, other things, and now this is the cause du jour. But this is what Brianna Joy Gray told us when we were on her show. We would like to have gotten into this more on our show, but it was not to be.
Yeah.
It was not to be. No, actually, these terms, oppressor and oppressed, occupier, occupied, they do apply. They do apply. Yes. And this is the anti-woke grift. Oh, these are just woke people with fucking pierced navels who think that there's a such thing as oppression an occupation. If you think that exists in real life, it's because you have too many piercings and you're
Crazy
too woke.
talk.
Yeah.
That is exactly what I was going to say watching this. It's giving me flashbacks. The douchebag dialogues was 2 days of this.
Yep.
This is exactly what it was sitting through those panels and those conferences. It was the same exact smug, condescending, absolute assurance in one's superiority, and that superiority being rooted in the idea, which Murray himself, I read one of his books, he denies that he's a Western chauvinist, simply arguing that Western culture shouldn't be thrown out or denigrated, and all cultures have done horrible things, and that's a point of view I agree with. But no, actually, you are a Western supremacist, and you've proved it since October 7th. All these people did. They all said that. They all said, no, we're not saying we're Western. No, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Just because some people who, going back to the last segment, yeah, there are people who grift off this stuff. There are people who have very misguided ideas. There are people who are using a lot of ideas about colonization and oppression as a way to deflect from personal, emotional, psychological problems or personal failings. You know who else that's true of? Pretty much the entire spectrum of political engagement.
Right.
I don't think there's any sector of people involved in politics that don't have a certain number of people like that, who are using politics as a cover-up for deep-rooted psychological issues, or as a way to deflect from personal failings, or as a way to gain power over others. I can't think of a political ideology I can't say that about. So certainly you have people, and I've spoken out against them, but that doesn't mean that these core ideas are wrong. And as I said, from October 8th, pretty much, the very first article I wrote about this right after, this created cognitive dissonance for those amongst these kids who actually thought it meant something. The best of them are the ones who are going out there and protesting because they had been lulled into this fairy tale that these universities, that these institutions, that these media celebrities cared about white supremacy. And then in the event, it turned out none of them did. And the best of them took it to heart and have been out there fighting those institutions ever since. And it's an open question what this does to their perspective on those institutions long term.
Sure thing. All right, we're going to let him finish, and then we're going to go to Mehdi and Mr. Levy's rebuttal.
Colonized. And this incredibly simplistic idea that works nowhere, they then implant or try to implant over the world's most complex region. And they think in doing so that they're being good guys. And what they don't realize is that if they got what they wanted, they'd have finished the work of Adolf Hitler.
Perfect. Well, like something. All right.
Everything goes back to Hitler.
No,
what is that? Godwin's law?
Yeah, exactly.
If you argue long enough, everything goes back to Hitler.
All right, so they go into... So now I'm going to play Mehdi Hasan's response, part of his response, because Mehdi Hasan gets a bit repetitive. But then we're going to go to Gideon Levy's response after that. So we'll play this with minimal interruption, because this is really good, especially Levy.
Douglas earlier was telling us all about the importance of journalism going on the ground. While Douglas was getting awards from the President of Israel, we were actually reporting my news organization, Zateo, from those campuses with Jewish students. In fact, the most read piece on our site is from a student called Jonathan Ben Menachem, who is at Columbia and reported from inside the encampment where they were having a Seder, where he was protesting war crimes in Gaza, which I know the other side thinks there are no war crimes, everything we just imagined the last 8 months. What you have to tackle tonight, I'm glad we brought up college campuses, because again, if this ridiculous sweeping motion, Douglas says complexity, we are the side of complexity, we're not the ones saying anti-Zionism across the board is anti-Semitism, you have to deal with the fact that college protests are disproportionate. There are a disproportionate number of Jews in these protests. They're all brainwashed, they're all idiots, they're all self-haters. Some of the top academics at Columbia University who are Jewish have come out to defend the protests. Annalise Orlek is a 65-year-old former chair of Jewish studies at Dartmouth. She was beaten on camera by police while she was protesting against the war in Gaza. Apparently Douglas, an atheist, says that she's an anti-Semite. That's the debate, that's what we've got to tonight, where the former chair of Jewish studies at Dartmouth is an anti-Semite, while Douglas is the champion of the Jewish people. I find it bizarre.
I want to...
Okay, so that was part of his response. Pretty obvious stuff, but well put. And, now 8 months after, whatever you think of this guy, we're not fans. I mean, he is a careerist and, an opportunist. But it's very obvious now why he's not on MSNBC. Like, it's very, very obvious now why he is a freelancer once again. All right, so
it's him on this issue. It's been a good example of what we've been talking about. Hey, take your allies where you find them. I'll fight shoulder to shoulder with Mehdi Hasan on this issue.
Yeah, of course.
I think he means it. I don't feel like he's doing it for advantage. The smart play would have been to shut up about this.
Yeah, well, it wasn't for advantage. No. I mean, he got fired for it, for sure. All right, now here's Gideon Levy. So here's an Israeli Jew who makes a great point, because the question of this debate is anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, and of course Douglas Murray's formulation there is that the college protesters must be motivated by anti-Semitism because they weren't out protesting XYZ cause until now. This is really, really good stuff here.
Jewish people, I find it bizarre.
I want to a little bit calm down and speak for a moment about anti-Semitism. Where were the anti-Semites and the campuses when Israel went for peace in the Oslo years? How come that the world hugged Israel then? From coast to coast, from continent to continent, campuses and others hugged Israel because Israel went for peace. Now when we look backwards, obviously we see it was a kind of a trap, but let's put it aside. Where was anti-Semitism then? What, anti-Semitism went to sleep when Israel is doing the right thing? Anti-Semitism goes to sleep when Israel is following the international law? Anti-Semitism goes to sleep when Israel is following the resolutions of all the international institutions? It just wakes up if Israel doesn't? So if so, let's ask ourselves, what is the contribution of Israel's policy to the increase of anti-Semitism in the world?
Good point. When Israel gestured toward peace, however you evaluate those gestures with the privilege of hindsight, it's a different question. Why weren't they protesting them then? Why did they wait until they broke international law in this most egregious, most recent example? Like, if they hated Israel and they hated Jews, they'd be out protesting Israel no matter what they do, because that's what you do if you hate a group of people. Why is it, if they're motivated by anti-Semitism, did they wait until they committed a genocide in broad daylight to go out and protest them? That pretty much dismantles the whole argument right there. That was a point kind of hidden in plain sight the whole time, and good on him for recognizing that. Yeah,
exactly. It was one of those, why didn't anyone say that before? Yes.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. Right. The fact that they only went out and protested Israel when they committed a genocide is proof positive they did not hate them all along. That this is based on their actions, not who they are. And then he goes on.
There is anti-Semitism in the world. It should be fought without any compromises, no doubt about this. But the manipulation of Israel to label any criticism as anti-Semitism makes a damage to the fight against anti-Semitism. Because the genuine anti-Semitism we should fight. But the critics of Israel, part of them are anti-Semites, part of them are using what's happening to express anti-Semitism. And part of them, let me tell you, a big part of them, are people of conscience, are people that not only have the right to criticize Israel, they have the duty to do so. Okay, Gideon, that's it.
Very well done. Very well said.
And absolutely. And just speaking to what he's saying, certainly we've experienced that, where you get these anti-Semites who have wandered onto our channel, or when we've guest hosted over at Jimmy's, thinking, yeah, now those are some Jews I can deal with, some Jew-hating kind of Jews. Tell me more about them Jew tunnels, boys. As soon as I said, yeah, no, that this whole thing about pedophilia, I mean, it's closed religious societies, Catholic Church, Amish, whatever, you're going to see that kind of thing. God damn it, you're those kind of Jews. I thought you were the good kind of Jews, right? Like, yeah, sure, man. You got these people who are using the battle against Zionism as a way to insert their anti-Semitism, or as a vehicle for their anti-Semitism. Absolutely, those people exist.
But that's a very small minority. Yeah.
It is an extremely small minority of the movement, as evidenced by the fact that there are so many Jews involved in that movement. Matt, God, outside of what? David Pakman? Is there any other Jew, using the term left extremely broadly, doing commentary who's not anti-Zionist, who has not taken a pro-Palestine position?
Well, there's that TYT
Pakman
guy, Ben Glebe, right? They had that big throwdown that we covered a while back. But that's those two are really the only ones I could think of.
All right, so that's a pretty funny ratio for an anti-Semitic movement.
Yeah. No, indeed. And that was just extremely well said. Levy was extremely impressive throughout this whole thing. Mehdi Hasan did pretty well too, but he made more of the obvious points. You know what I mean? And he did it well. But that was just extremely well done. All right, we're gonna go to the B part of this segment. So I'll set this up again from the top here. We are covering the Munk debate between Douglas Murray and I forget who the woman was. She didn't really make much of an impression on me. Versus Mehdi Hasan and Gideon Levy. Now, we covered pretty thoroughly the dissident dialogues debate, Brianna Joy Gray versus the Penguin and the Riddler. And one of the things that Russell experienced...
I actually made a video that we were going to show. So hopefully we'll get to use that at some point, get even more into it.
Exactly.
Well, we need Brianna for that.
We do need Brianna for that. Yes, indeed. So here's hoping. But Russell was in the room that night, and he saw firsthand, experienced in person, the hostility of the crowd. So this Munk debate was co-sponsored by FIRE, which is a free speech advocacy group that tends to traffic in a lot of the same sort of anti-woke discourse that we saw at the dissident dialogues. One of the higher ups at FIRE was at one of the panels, right, at the douchebag dialogue conference there.
Which one?
One of the guys from FIRE, right, was there.
Yes, he didn't say a fucking word about this subject.
Right. Yeah, indeed.
I was very disappointed by that.
So this little piece here really focuses on the audience response, the bias of the room. So the anti-Zionist side lost this debate. It was a stacked room going in. The resolution is anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism. It was 61% said yes, it is at the outset. 39% said no, it isn't at the outset. So right there, you're talking about over 60-40, the room is on the Zionist side. So here's just an example of Mehdi Hasan battling the audience of the debate.
The propositions that I've sprayed around the word lie and liar, so let's return the compliment. Natasha lied when she talked about UNRWA and terrorism. The UN set up an independent inquiry, asked the Israelis for evidence. I know you don't want to hear this.
He was talking about the accusations against UNRWA, where they accused UNRWA of being sort of systematically responsible, in part at least, for October 7th. That's why we defunded them. Many Western nations defunded them. And then we asked Israel, oh, by the way, do you have any evidence to back that up? Because we just defunded an aid agency as a famine is setting in. And they did not produce the evidence. So that's what he is referencing there. Listen to the roaring boos from the audience when he mentions that fact. That's just a documented fact.
About UNRWA and terrorism. The UN set up an independent inquiry, asked the Israelis for evidence. I know you don't want to hear this. They asked the Israelis, she's parroting propaganda from the Israeli government. The Israeli government was asked to give evidence. They refused to give their evidence. Every Western government, including your own, Canada's, has restarted funding because they looked at the evidence and didn't see it. That's great. I get it. But as Douglas might have once said, facts don't care about your feelings. You can't even get Israeli propaganda straight.
Okay, so this is later in the debate. This is one of his closing monologues. And then we're going to get to the results to see how the audience was moved throughout this process.
Is a very dissident douchebags kind of a crowd.
Oh, yeah. Same dynamic. Absolutely.
Same crowd.
Same exact dynamic.
The Israeli government's own security agency, Shin Bet, investigated what you just said and said, no, we found no evidence that workers from Gaza were involved in the October 7th attack. Oh, Shin Bet are lying. They're booing Shin Bet, the Israeli security service. Got it. All right, let me finish my point. You had a 5-minute speech from your side. Okay, that's Shin Bet. Let me just deal with your wider point here. Douglas and Natasha tonight want to make this entire debate about October 7th. I get it. It's a horror show. But that's not the debate. The debate was about Zionism, and it tells you a lot that they can't find any arguments to say, as Gideon says, why we can't be allowed to criticize a political ideology that is 150 years old, that many Jewish people have criticized from the beginning and continue to do so. They can't tell you why that is. So they focus on October the 7th, which is fine, but if you're going to focus on October 7th, then also focus on what happened since October the 7th, the erasure of Palestinians in this debate, the booing when Gideon mentions what happened to Palestinians. Shameful. I'm sorry to say it's absolutely shameful and telling about what's going on. And I would say this.
Same experience Brianna had at the Dissident Dialogue. I can't believe the responses in this room.
Yep. That is, as many have commented, the Third Reich is coming up a lot in this show. Who knew?
Yeah.
They act like Nazis. They do. Yeah. When you adopt a racial supremacist ideology and you call that an ethic, well, this is how you're going to behave. When people start telling you you're monstrous, telling you about the crimes that people with your ideology commit, what are you going to do? Boo!
Yeah, right.
Boo!
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
I mean, what would have been different? A room full of Germans in 1941.
Exactly.
If we're going to talk about October 7th and what happened since, everyone's a liar. The Hamas health ministry is like, everyone's a liar. Okay. Friend of mine, American doctor, goes to Gaza. Many doctors have gone to Gaza. You've seen them on the news. They're all liars, all Hamas, apparently. Friend of mine went to Gaza. He's been to Sudan. He doesn't just use it for whataboutism like Douglas. He's been to Sudan. He's been to Afghanistan. He's worked there. He came back from Gaza and said, I've never seen atrocities like I've seen here. What's happened to children? He's an anti-Semite because he saw children with burn wounds like he's never seen. He saw children with gunshot wounds to the head. But that's Hamas's fault. Everything is Hamas's fault. So let's talk about war crimes. It is amazing that every human rights group in the world, including Israeli human rights groups like B'Tselem, Gisha, Yeshtin, are all documenting this stuff, but you guys think it's all imaginary. So again, it tells you about what Zionism is. This is not about some abstract ideology of, people trying to settle the land and trying to have it. But as Gideon said, there was an argument to be had in the 1940s, 30s, 20s. Zionism today is what the Palestinians are enduring on a daily, nightly basis in Gaza, in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, in Israel itself. And the erasure of that tells you everything about why we need to be able to talk about what Zionism does to the Palestinians without being smeared as anti-Semites.
There you go. Well said. Now let's see what kind of impact that made on the room. Okay, so you could see, I don't know what 7723 is. I forgot about that because I watched the full debate, but I forget what that number is. Oh, that's the number of people who were open to having their minds changed. That's what they said. Okay, so they said at the beginning, how many of you think anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism? 61% said yes, it is. 39% said no, it isn't. And then I guess 77% of these people, because they're a debate audience, thought they should claim that their minds were open. Yeah. I bet they were. Yeah. But let's see how they were moved.
Vote coming in, 66% in favor of the motion, 34% opposed.
Very satisfied with himself. Douglas Murray wins again. So at the end of the night, 66% believed anti-Zionism was anti-Semitism. So the anti-Zionist team actually lost ground, which in that room, you could imagine that was going to be the case. That's what you call a stacked audience. But despite that, I thought they did pretty well. They did great. Yeah.
The fault lies not in them. It lies in these fucking disgusting pigs that they had to try to convince.
Yeah.
And
actually, given the room, it's kind of remarkable that they held the line as much as they did. They only lost 5 points.
It's kind of remarkable they didn't get chased out with pitchforks and torches.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Get matzo brie thrown at them because clearly that fucking audience was stacked. Hasan made the point in his opening statement. This is not about how you feel about the state of Israel. He emphatically pointed out you could be pro-Zionist and be against this resolution because the resolution was specifically not do you support or are you against the state of Israel? Are you for or against the core precepts of Zionism? It was specifically, is Zionism anti-Semitism? This is how absolutely sick, deranged, and dangerous these people are, because I promise you, these same people are going to scream at you about how Trump has to be stopped to save democracy. I know this isn't Canada, but as we know, everyone around the world pays perhaps more attention to our politics than to our own, for good reason, because, you know, we sneeze and it creates shockwaves around the world. So everyone's tuned into us in a way that we're like, hang on, England has a parliament? You know, we don't know shit over here, but they're very keyed into what we do. And I promise you, all these people are anti-Trump.
Well, Mehdi actually brought that up to Douglas Murray. He said Douglas Murray's been out here for the last few years parading about what a free speech champion he is. This question is really more about freedom of speech than anything else. It's not a referendum on Israel. It's a referendum on speech. Basically, the question is, can you debate Zionism in good faith without being called a bigot? And Douglas Murray's answer was no, which shows you that all this posturing about free speech, total bullshit, never believed a word of it. Just a Western chauvinist, racist pig.
All these motherfuckers are. Even when they're black. John McWhorter.
Yep.
He was on that panel. I keep mentioning it. I can't wait till they drop that so we can clip it.
Yeah.
Do you think we're past peak woke? I would have thought so until 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Fucking pig. Like, all of them were like that at the Dissident Dialogues. The same thing. Oh, the pink hair. They think they stand for something, but they're so naive.
Yep.
All of these guys, and all of them were talking about how anti-woke they were because the Aristotelian tradition of rational discourse and debate and Platonic dialogue. All that shit went out the window October 7th with these people.
Yep, indeed. The question here is,
never
can
meant
you,
a word of it.
Yeah, can you debate Zionism without being branded a bigot? That was all that was up for
that was it.
Debate
it was
here.
not about whether you support Israel, and they couldn't even do that.
Couldn't even do that. Exactly. Unearned opinion. Watch Kurameyer Ahau and Dane Calloway, non-white. They break down documented evidence that the Civil War history is utterly manipulated to keep us thinking we're racist and protect corporate power. Thank you, Unearned Opinion. Russell, are you familiar? Hey, Jax, thanks for joining. Thanks for the $5, Jax Page. Russell, are you familiar with the Corwin Amendment to legalize slavery? Check it out. It will blow your mind.
I have to take a look at that. Since it's coming up, let me just mention, because of course you have the people who are not able to keep up. I never said the people in the South are Nazis. I never said the people in the South are racist. I'd say it's a good bet that the daughters of the Confederacy are. I'd say it's a good bet that the people who pay to maintain this museum are. I would say it's a good bet that people who belong to an aristocratic descendants of a elite planter class that own slaves that choose not to continue their parade rather than to integrate and reveal their membership are. That's what I'm talking about when I say Nazis.
And you know, the speaking of this, the New York Times actually did. I saw this right before we signed on. They did run an op-ed today for Juneteenth saying that we should outlaw prison slavery. He says we've outlawed slavery everywhere but prison. So maybe we could do that tomorrow. Actually, we got the morning show tomorrow.
You know what? I should go back and try to get that journalist who we were gonna get her on when I was out in LA, who wrote the AP article.
Yep.
I'll reopen that conversation. Hopefully we can get her, because I really wanted to cover that.
Well, we have more scheduling flexibility now.
Now that we don't stream our interviews anymore. That was just we were just spitballing, and we were like, hey, maybe we shouldn't stream our interviews. I don't know what.
I mean, we'll stream some.
What made us decide?
But there will be some where we won't. Yeah, we'll take.
You know who will stream? Taibbi. He always shows up.
He shows up. He's on time. That's right.
He's there when he's supposed to be.
What a putz. Thanks for the 99 cents. Appreciate that. Meshut Skeets. We We still have slavery, and it's called capitalism, exploiting weaker countries and even our own people. Thank you, Michoud Skeet. Those are my boys. They're home. All right, Penny, relax. Relax. I knew it was a mistake having the dog hang out with me in here. Hold on one second.
All right. So when he comes back, I'm gonna show my nipple tassels. Don't tell him.
The dog goes crazy when any of us come home, and she wanted to hang out in the office with me today, so I let her. But yeah, there you go. What's that?
Between me and the audience.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see here. Michael Castillo. I don't care who knows it. I love you, gentlemen. Russell, you're the MFKN man, motherfucking man. Thank you for all you do. That's a nice compliment.
Thank you. That's very nice.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Boeing was just hit with fake titanium parts from a supplier now on planes.
Yeah,
This issue has also hit Airbus A220 production at Mirabel.
Yes, I was rushing so much. Like Jake, as he should, edited that, but he cut out some stuff that I would have kept in like that. And I was in such a rush, I didn't realize that wasn't in there. But yes, no, Spirit Airlines, which we're saved. Boeing says they're going to be buying them. They'll fix it. Some aluminum parts got into the supply chain that weren't certified, and that wound up with both Boeing and Airbus, actually. That impacted both airlines.
Interesting. I'm an experienced environmental organizer who approached the Green Party to volunteer as intern, and literally no one got back to me. Unserious people. No, they're known for that. Yeah. Just impossible. Absolutely impossible. It's almost like they're not trying, right?
Yep.
Public DNA tests are banned in Israel. Yes, that's what Russ was saying, indeed. Larry Goldstein, anti-Zionist Jew, I assume. Thanks, Larry, for the $5. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Let's go to a few Rumble rants here. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, says His Highness. Instead of taking down these statues, we should teach the whole story about these people, good deeds, and bad.
It's a great idea. Take down the statues, put them in a museum that puts them in a proper context. I said from the beginning of that segment, I don't think you shouldn't have a museum like this.
Right.
I showed you exactly what was wrong with it. Not that, yeah, man, that the Viewmaster, I thought that was really fucking interesting. Like, there's
cool.
nothing wrong with that. But that's not what that museum was about. The intention was not simply to teach history. It was a glorification of a racist cause.
Indeed. His Highness, I actually had a subscription to Southern Cracker Weekly. In my defense, however, I'm a big fan of soup and thought it was about the food stuff. That was an awkward day at the post office. Thank you. Yes, awkward day at the post office, indeed.
Anticipating another argument. Yeah, most of the people fighting in the Confederacy would have been poor whites who didn't own slaves. I think they mentioned that at one point in there. Sure, but the people running the shit did.
Right.
People who organized that war, who started that war, who wanted that war did. So so you want to argue the average soldier on the field was not really responsible? Sure. And your point being?
Yeah. Our friend Ellen Jimerson, really good piece, Russell.
Thanks,
Ellen. Thanks, Ellen.
Man, I'll take Ellen's work because she is a Southern girl through and through.
That's right. Barbara Boxer was almost killed that day. How dare you, Keaton? Yes. Thank you. Let's see here. Fire is a righteous organization. I saw Fire first in Liberty Mag. An article of Liberty inspired my stand-up joke. People die with cold feet. Joan of Arc was definitely a witch because she died with hot feet. Thank you. Appreciate that. Ricky Dicky 22, as a Canadian speaking here, if you think Zionist Americans are bad, Zionist Canadians are off the charts. Interesting perspective. Thank you.
Really?
Appreciate
Interesting.
that. Stoop Signs.
You know who I'm finding the worst are? Indian Zionists.
Hey, we got one of them who's nice. He was friendly. Came to see us.
In general.
In general.
Yeah.
Sammy accepted. Sammy's a nice, one of the nice.
I know a very confused Indian because he's gay, and he's in with kind of the hip bohemian crowd, and he keeps trying to post shit like, yeah, these privileged kids, and he keeps getting attacked by all the lefties and his crowd. He doesn't know what to do with that.
Right. Stoop sign, glad Keaton didn't go all South Dakota governor on the dog. Yeah. No, I did not. No, I usually don't keep her in here with me when we're doing this because if she walks around the table to the other side, she could step on the Ethernet cable and ruin the whole stream. But the way I rearranged this room with the bookshelf, I'm able to block off that section of the room. So now she can hang out in here when she wants to. So, yes, able to make that happen for her. All right, folks, I know we're running long, but we got one more segment that was advertised in the thumbnail, and so deliver we will, because we
I thought we were done.
We do what we advertise. Well, we do what we say we're going to do here. That's the kind of show we run.
We do. We follow through.
Right, like if we put something on the thing, like let's say we were to advertise a show, like as an example, Brianna Joy Gray joins. If we really want to make sure she's here so that we don't bait and switch you guys, right? So here's the last segment of the day. Of the day.
We always try to do what we say we're going to do.
Right, because that's just good form, right? Yes. So here's a story.
You know where they teach you that? Harvard.
Right, yeah, Harvard. Yeah, you learned that at Harvard. That's business ethics 101 at Harvard University. That's true. Indeed. This is a quick one. Last segment of the day, a quick one, folks. Benjamin Netanyahu tweeted out the following yesterday. Give us the tools and we'll finish the job. And so here's the video attached to that.
When Secretary Blinken was recently here in Israel, we had a candid conversation. I said I deeply appreciated the support the U.S. has given Israel from the beginning of the war. But I also said something else. I said it's inconceivable that in the past few months, the administration has been withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel. Israel, America's closest ally, fighting for its life, fighting against Iran and our other common enemies. Secretary Blinken assured me that the administration is working day and night to remove these bottlenecks. I certainly hope that's the case. It should be the case. During World War II, Churchill told the United States, give us the tools, we'll do the job. And I say, give us the tools and we'll finish the job a lot faster.
I don't know how we get the reputation of being pushy and unreasonable. I don't know where we got that reputation from. That is a blood libel. Well, apparently, and this just broke last night in Axios, and for some reason I was not alerted to this. I have to give my dad a shout out because he texted me this right before we went on. I did not know.
Never gonna Jew you up, never gonna Jew you down.
Exactly. Exactly. My dad texted me this right before the show, and I can't believe we missed this because this was pretty big news. So that video there, that message, apparently cost Benjamin Netanyahu his invite to the White House. From Axios, scoop, White House cancels meeting, scolds Netanyahu in protest over video. The White House canceled a high-level U.S.-Israel meeting on Iran that was scheduled for Thursday after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a video on Tuesday claiming the U.S. was withholding military aid to U.S. officials, tell Axios. President Biden's top advisors were enraged by the video, a message U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein delivered personally to Netanyahu in a meeting hours after it was published, two U.S. and Israeli sources say. Then the White House decided to go a step further by canceling Thursday's meeting. So they canceled Netanyahu's meeting. Okay, so maybe this was not the visit to D.C., but maybe this was a meeting that was due to take place. Like I said, I just found out about this right before air. But they did make a gesture.
We have Netanyahu's response. Well, it sounds like the Israeli people are behind him.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow,
this
decision like that speech.
Makes it clear there are consequences for pulling such stunts, U.S. officials said. The Americans are fuming. Bibi's video made a lot of damage, a senior Israeli official said, using a nickname for Netanyahu. Yeah, so we know that the United States is under the thumb of Israel, but apparently there are still consequences to talking to the president of the United States.
Where the fuck did you get the balls?
You're talking to the president of the United States like he's a tourist on Orchard Street that you're trying to hustle into a pair of fake sunglasses, right? Like, you can't be that obnoxious with the president without a certain consequence. I mean, the fucking balls on this guy.
The U.S. has given Israel from the beginning of the war.
But
I also said something else. I said it's inconceivable that in the past few months, the administration has been withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel.
You know what?
Israel,
you would look
America's
very good
closest
in this
ally,
suit.
What a
We
fucking...
have 50% off on a suit just like this. You could walk out looking like me.
Matches
I'll
the
I'll
flag
throw
behind
in
you.
the tie for free.
Yeah, matches the flag in back of you, right? Wow. Yeah, so apparently this wasn't his speech. It was a meeting that was scheduled for Thursday. They didn't cancel his address to Congress. Like I said, I'm flying by the seat of my pants here because that just broke right before we went on. Or it didn't break, but I was just made aware of that right before we went on. So apparently they made a little gesture of disapproval for this guy running his mouth like that. But wow, that is chutzpah, as they say. No doubt about that.
Yeah, no, that is it. I do not, as a Jewish person, I do not in any way feel like Netanyahu and the state of Israel is like an anti-Semitism EMP sending anti-Semitism waves throughout the world every time they open their mouths.
Yeah, no. But part of why he does this too is because for as good as Biden has been to him, you know, he would rather Trump win. So he'll hurt Biden politically as much as he wants. He'd rather Trump win. They helped Trump win in 2016. They colluded with Donald Trump in 2016. Thomas Massey is on camera now. Yeah.
I discussed with friend of show Barbara Streisand.
That's right.
She didn't respond, but yeah.
Right. You mentioned that on Twitter. No, they colluded with Trump in 2016. They'd obviously rather deal with Trump now than Biden. And so there's no, like, Biden has no cards here in these back and forths with Netanyahu. Netanyahu knows no loyalty to Joe Biden. He doesn't give a shit. There's not a loyal bone in this motherfucker's body. So of course he's got to come out here and do this. He has no regard for Joe Biden's prospects. If he has an investment in this race, he's probably hoping that Trump wins. Sure. You have this influence campaign being run by Israel on behalf of, which is mostly in favor of Republicans. Not that AIPAC doesn't own the Democrats, too. They do. Right. But Thomas Massey said every Republican has an AIPAC handler. You have proven collusion in 2016.
Which that's definitely true of the Democrats. Yeah, I mean, you might have a few of them that they want out, like Bowman, who don't have one. Yeah, certainly everyone with power has one. Jeffries, Pelosi.
They're
Wasserman Schmuck, of course. Yeah. She probably is the AIPAC person.
She is. Yeah, she's the Republicans' AIPAC person. Yeah. But no, so you have collusion in 2016. You have Thomas Massey going on Tucker Carlson now saying every Republican has an AIPAC person. And yet, where is the liberal media? Where is MSNBC saying this is interference on behalf of a foreign power in our democratic process with the intention, for all we know, and all signs point to, the intention of undermining Joe Biden in an election year, going into the heart of campaign season, on behalf of a foreign power that colluded with Trump the first time he won. That's not a story? No, that's not a story when it's Israel. It's a story when it's Russia, not a story when it's Israel.
This is where the libertarians have it right. People like Rand Paul, the isolationists. Go home and get your fucking shine box. Leave us alone.
Right.
Go, why does everybody have their hand out to us?
Yeah, indeed.
If it's not Netanyahu, it's Zelensky.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Russia has a state for Jews today. DNA Ashkenazi Jewish is 1/3 to 1/2 Mideast Jew. Palestinians have little Jewish DNA. Love you, but I gotta correct.
Okay, what's your source for that?
Yeah, what's your source for that?
Because I've looked into this and that's total bullshit.
Yeah.
You know how I could tell? My own fucking DNA test.
Yeah. Yeah, if you draw it back, it's true. If you draw it back, that is true. That the Palestinians have well, I mean, look, it's obvious. It's obvious. They're a settler state. They're white Europeans. They're not from there.
Right.
I mean, it's just obvious.
Well, and if it were not, you know who I think would be all for DNA test in Israel? Israel.
Yeah, Israelis, right.
Why would they not want DNA tests if that would reveal what you're saying?
Right.
The Ashkenazis are Middle Eastern. Yeah, we look really.
Yeah, we look
really
it.
Middle Eastern. Oh yeah.
I'm more Middle Eastern on my Catholic side than on my Jewish side. On my Maltese side, I'm probably a third of my Maltese side is Libyan. So I'm probably 1/6 Libyan. I'm 1/6 African. I have more African blood in me than Liz Warren has Native American blood.
You're 1/6 African?
Well, I'm saying about, if I had to estimate. The Maltese are basically a mix of Sicilian, Greek, and North African.
North African.
North African.
North
Well,
African.
Yeah, I just make that joke.
I thought you were saying you were like a sectoroon or something.
No, I'm saying because I made this joke before when, we talk about Liz Warren claiming she's a Native American, how offensive that is. I'm like, I could technically, by that definition, say I'm African American. I have way more African blood in me than she has Native American blood in her. But what I'm saying is I'm more Middle Eastern on my Catholic side than on my Jewish side.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Jewish side, I'm Ukrainian and German.
If that were true, don't you think the Zionists would be screaming it from the rooftops?
Yeah.
Because so many people throw that at them. You're not from there. DNA test show we are half Middle Eastern.
I don't understand how. Yeah,
have you ever heard them say that? Well, there's a reason, because it's not fucking true.
Yeah, I don't understand how that's not the most obvious thing in the world. Okay. Clockwork Orange brewing just for you. Thank you, Dodger 12. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, Murray Gays for Palestine is rich because his allies in Europe, AFDGB News founder, most of the far right in Europe are anti-gay and support Israel. Yeah, I think they made that point to him as well. Well, they made the point to him that a lot of anti-Semitism is of the right-wing variety, which he doesn't tend to call out as much because they are his allies on other issues.
Well, they're his donors.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
He's their pet gay.
Right. Exactly. Was Murray upset at Trump's Jews won't replace rendezvous? Well, so there you go. I hadn't read your super chat until just now, but I just basically added to that point a second ago. That was brought up over the course of that Munk debate. Julie Desnick says, you don't get it. Look more. It's not obvious. Well, it's certainly not obvious. I mean, it's definitely not obvious.
Yeah.
All right. Eric Rousseau, I've got my tool, but I need someone to finish me off. Thank you, Eric Rousseau. It's not going to work, Joe. We're not going to vote for you. Smell inside your nose. Thank you for the $1. All right, folks, that is our show for the day. We thank you guys very much for being here. Morning due tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. That is when we will be on. So we thank you guys very much for being here this afternoon with us. Hit that like button on the way out. Hit that subscribe button on the way out over on Rumble. Same thing. Like and follow, please. And thank you. We appreciate you all very, very much. Thank you for being here. We will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, 9 a.m. Eastern. Until then, be safe and be well.
Courage.
Please clap.